How would you fix Elite Dangerous? It's an interesting question and one which I recently put to AI. The proposition was pretty simple. Set out a list of subjects and topics from Elite Dangerous and ask the AI its thoughts upon that and how it would improve those. Now, the AI I used is ChatGPT. It's super popular at the moment, many of you will no doubt have heard of it. Further into the video, we're going to get into some pretty interesting discussions on AI itself, the pitfalls and benefits of using it, but that will be further into the video. Let's get to the content itself. Now, I also wanted to make sure this is a balanced video, so I asked the AI both about the problems with Elite as well as the benefits and successes of Elite. Let's get to the problems first. So, keeping the questions pretty broad rather than laser focused, I asked, describe the problems with gameplay in Elite Dangerous and give suggestions on how to fix them or how to improve it. The gameplay in Elite Dangerous is vast and offers a lot of activities to players, from trading to fighting to mining, exploring and more. However, some problems have been reported by players that can affect their experience. So it says the problems are repetitive and unvaried missions, lack of clear objectives and direction, unbalanced and imbalanced economies, as well as unresponsive or hard to use controls. So those are some very specific ones, and you will have heard these quite often throughout the time playing Elite, I'm sure. So to improve these issues, some suggestions could be introduce new and diverse mission types to keep players engaged and motivated instead of repeating the same objectives over and over again. Include more clear and detailed tutorials, guides and objectives to help players understand what to do, where to go and how to engage in different activities in the game. Balance the economy and make it fairer to all players by adjusting prices of ships, equipment and resources and limited the advantages of certain activities. Redesign the UI and controls, make them more responsive, intuitive and customizable to suit different playstyles and preferences. Encourage and provide more player-driven activities and events to improve the sense of community, immersion and make the game more engaging. So all pretty reasonable suggestions there, as well as pretty reasonable identification of some very broad issues with the game. Now, I'm not going to give my personal opinion on all of these other than to say I do think they're entirely reasonable, and I think they are the things that players have been asking for probably the most. And that really brings us back to how this AI works. It does go out there and scan the internet, the various different sources out there, and collect various information on that. So what the AI is doing here is repeating back the broad consensus that's made amongst the various players of Elite Dangerous all across the internet. Really a very good way to get a kind of insight into what the average player might be thinking. Let's move on. Describe the problems with the engineers in Elite Dangerous and give suggestions on how to improve them. Now, as I did before, I'm just going to summarize what it says, and if you want to pause the video and read the full responses, you certainly can. So for the engineers, it says limited access. Some players have reported the engineers are hard to find and access to service is limited. Complex process. The process of upgrading and modifying ships with engineers can be complex. Lack of variety. Some players have reported that the upgrades and modifications offered by the engineers are repetitive. Unbalanced costs. Some players have reported that the costs of upgrades and modifications offered by the engineers are too high. To improve these issues, some suggestions could be increase accessibility and visibility of the engineers in the game through the use of new in-game menus or markers, or by making them more common in the galaxy. The second suggestion, simplify the process of upgrading and modifying ships with the engineers by making it more user-friendly and easier to understand. The third, introduce new weapons and modifications. The fourth, rebalance the costs of upgrades and modifications. The fifth, introduce new ways of acquiring the materials needed to upgrade and modify the ships. This can be through gameplay missions or special events. Number 5, I think, is especially interesting. I think, perhaps for me at least, and perhaps many other people out there, one of the biggest hurdles is the nature of collecting those materials. It can get very repetitive and pretty boring and very, very quick. And of course, you can collect materials as you plan along, as many people do suggest, but for me, that's not really optimal or not really ideal. So yeah, another very nice suggestion here. So yeah, the AI is doing a very good job of getting this information together, isn't it? Now, there's one more question I wanted to ask before moving on to the positive side of things. Describe the problems with exploration in Elite Dangerous and give suggestions on how to improve it. Exploration is one of the core elements of Elite Dangerous, as players are able to freely explore a vast and open-world galaxy. However, some players have reported issues with the game's exploration feature, including limited and uninventive exploration activities, lack of meaningful rewards for exploration, limited information and tools, boring and uninhabited systems. To improve these issues, some suggestions could be introduce new and diverse exploration activities such as discovering new alien life forms, finding hidden ruins, or researching ancient artifacts. This will give players more to discover and more reasons to explore. Offer more meaningful rewards for exploration such as new ships or equipment. Now, the third issue here is provide more information and tools to help players plan and execute their exploration, such as new in-game maps, sensors, and other equipment that can help them navigate and discover new systems and planets. So this point very much comes down to the game's over-reliance on external tools. Hardly ideal when it comes to Elite Dangerous. I think many of us have felt for a long time that a lot of that should actually be in the game and give players far more direction. The fourth suggestion here is make systems and planets more interesting and diverse by adding new features such as hidden locations, dangerous creatures, or unique events to make them feel more alive and engaging. So dangerous creatures would be especially interesting with the whole idea of Odyssey now and people being on foot. But also hidden locations is something I'd especially like to see. The fifth suggestion, improve the generation algorithm for the systems to make them less repetitive and more varied. This will make the game's galaxy more believable and interesting for players to explore. Now, yes, Elite Dangerous does use real-world science as a basis for these star systems within Elite Dangerous, and if you spend enough time, you will find a lot of varied locations out there. Just look at various other YouTube content creators out there, including some of my own footage, and you will see that even today, there's some truly stunning locations out there and truly stunning footage. But in my honest opinion, all of it really does pale in comparison to what can be found in Space Engine, which is another tool, another piece of software out there, which relies on real-world science, but creates far more variation and much more interesting results. So something Elite could definitely benefit from and Frontier could certainly learn from. However, it seems that nowadays exploration is far from their focus. Yes, they've increased the payout for biomes or biology and all of that, but it hasn't changed the gameplay in any way whatsoever. Okay, so that's a number of the problems. I don't think that was negative in any way. The AI has done a very good job of being extremely constructive with the way it's presented the criticisms here and the suggestions, so nice job. Let's move on to the real good things about Elite. Why do players actually enjoy the game? What is the single best thing about the video game Elite Dangerous? So, really neat question there, straightforward. Let's see what the AI has to say. It's difficult to pinpoint the single best thing about Elite Dangerous, as different players may have different preferences and priorities. One thing that many players might consider as the best thing about the game is its immersive open-world galaxy and the sense of discovery it brings. Elite Dangerous offers a detailed and realistic simulation of space with a vast and complex galaxy to explore and the ability to fly to different systems, discover new planets and other space bodies, and experience different events and activities. This feature allows players to create their own stories and experiences as they are able to explore and discover at their own pace and in the way they prefer. So this is really interesting actually. The one thing that the AI zeroes in on is the galaxy of Elite Dangerous, easily its single best asset. And it zeroes in on this, suggesting that it's perhaps one of the things that many players might consider as the best thing. Keep in mind that the AI bases its opinion and its thoughts and on what it reads on the internet. So if this is perhaps the most popular consensus on the internet, it's highly likely the reason why ChatGPT has picked it up. So if this is true, exploration, perhaps one of the single best things about Elite Dangerous according to many players. Bit of a shame that Frontier are no longer focusing on that. Let's ask another question. Describe why players enjoy the flight model in the video game Elite Dangerous. Players enjoy the flight model in the video game Elite Dangerous because it offers a high level of realism and immersion. The game's flight physics are based on real-world aerodynamics and Newtonian physics, which means that players must take into account factors such as thrust, drag and mass when flying their ships. This level of realism allows players to feel that they are truly piloting a spaceship. So this section goes on quite a bit. I'll leave it on screen if you want to pause the video and read it, but it's going into a lot of detail on the flight model, basically summarising here that a lot of why players enjoy the flight model is to do with its challenge as well as some of its real-world physics. So yeah, that's pretty interesting stuff and pretty accurate. Well, let's ask one final question. Describe why players enjoy combat. So we're getting multiple point answers here. Realistic and immersive gameplay. The game's combat is based on real-world physics and technology, which makes it feel challenging and engaging. I think that's a little bit of a stretch, real-world technology, but I do get the point. Players must take into account factors such as weapons range, power and reload times when engaging in combat, as well as the ship's speed and maneuverability. 2. A variety of weapons and ships. 3. Player choice and flexibility. The game's combat allows for a high level of player choice and flexibility. So yeah, that one's pretty accurate as well, pretty good. Multiplayer aspect. The game also offers a multiplayer aspect which allows players to experience intense and high stakes engagements. And 5. A sense of community and purpose. The game also has a dynamic NPC controlled galaxy with a simulation of the economy and politics, which is heavily influenced by the player's actions and decisions. This creates a sense of community and purpose. Players can take part in activities that directly affect the economy, politics, or military balance of power of the galaxy. All of these reasons help create a unique, challenging and satisfying experience that players enjoy when engaging in combat in Elite Dangerous. So there we have it, some pretty interesting thoughts from AI on, well, the video game Elite Dangerous. Both some of the problems along with some suggestions on how to fix it, along with some thoughts on why players enjoy the game from a variety of different perspectives. So some very interesting stuff there. I think it's worth keeping in mind that overall the chatbot is building a consensus here from what it finds out on the internet. So the results here should neither be considered accurate nor inaccurate, but rather just a reflection of the information that has been fed into the chatbot over the various years that it's been in operation and scanning some of the information out there. Another point worth considering is that the ChatGPT has said multiple times that its cutoff point from data is 2021. So nothing I asked here specifically would have changed from 2022 onwards, perhaps a little bit with the release of Odyssey or the improvement of Odyssey. But generally speaking, most of what we've seen here in response to the questions asked would probably be answered the same today if it had up-to-date information. On another note, I'd really like to get into a pretty deep discussion about AI, but it seems like that might be a bit of a too broader subject or too in-depth subject for this particular video. But that said, I do think over the coming years we're going to face some very interesting challenges and some pretty nice benefits when it comes to AI. The recent controversy around AI art, for example, is one such challenge perhaps, and one such benefit. Challenge because a controversy because it's kind of still in people's art in many different ways, but also a benefit because it brings art straight into the hands of people who are really not talented in that arena. Anyway, I'm not going to dive too deep into that particular side of things. Instead, the objective of this video was to see well, how the AI would perform, whether it was capable of providing some interesting content and discussion about the game itself. In my opinion, it did pretty good on that. Some of the information was pretty generic here, but I think that's to be expected. And being fair here, I didn't really zero in on and ask very specific questions. These were very broad questions. So yeah, overall, I think it performed very well. Do let me know your thoughts and feelings on all of this in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.